What's up, everybody? My name is Indy, and the handsome gentleman next to me right there with the lovely beanie in the freezing cold, that's Mr. J. Powell from Powell Group Consulting, and this is Indie Game Business. And today we're going to be talking about how to be fully prepared for your next meeting with your publisher. Maybe it's the first meeting, maybe it's your next meeting, but we've got some answers for you, and I'm sure you got some questions. So here, Jay's got some tips and tricks and all the good stuff that you need to know. Take it away, Mr. J.
Actually have my first emails this week on people asking me if I will be at GDC. And I said, yes. I'm just still not quite ready to deal with idiots on airplanes yet and thinking about dealing with idiots on airplanes yet. So obviously we've got our next event coming up December 1st through 3rd. So if you are looking for a publisher, to our developer friends out there, drop us a note, get you a ticket. We've already got like 40 or 50 games that are queued up in the showcase there that publishers to be looking at. And so that's why we wanted to do this. And so what we're going to go over today, it's yes, of course, it's pertinent for, our event, but it's also for everybody's event. You get a limited amount of time when you go in and you start talking to these publishers in a meeting. And so you want to make sure you've got all your shit together. So, we're going to start out. I'll go over some high level stuff and then we're going to jump right into questions. So if you are out there listening and you have questions, either drop them in the chat wherever you are on Twitch or YouTube or Facebook or Discord, what have you, or pop them over in the podcast questions on the Discord server and we'll get them answered. So a lot of what you have to do when you're getting prepared for these meetings is basically homework. Do some research, make sure that the publishers that you are reaching out to for a meeting and the ones that you are accepting meeting requests from are a good fit for your game. And the easiest way to do that is just go look at their website. Do they make games similar to yours? And that's going to be the first step for you. There are certain things that every publisher is going to want to see when they sit down in that meeting, and we cover a lot of this stuff when we do pitch deck reviews and all that sort of stuff. But from the basics, it's like, what's your budget? What platforms are you going to be on? How long is it going to take you to get it out there? What are the unique selling points? What puts your game ahead or makes it stand out from other games that are similar in the genre? And you get all that stuff ready, and that's a big chunk of the base. So when you are in the meeting, and there's an article that Arthur posted from the creator of Selfless about his experience in dealing with publishers, and it's an interesting read if you haven't seen it, because it was new to me. Let me pop it over in the chat, and so we're going to go through some of that stuff too. Let's see. There you go. So to get started, a couple of things that jumped out to me in this article that I just accidentally clicked off of. There we go. One of his first comments is, for indies to survive in the modern world, the visuals must be top quality. You should have individuality. A soul should shine through. Everything has to be so cute you almost want to touch it. That is news to a lot of folks, honestly, because they are so used to the rule for years of publishers don't care what the demo looks like. They just want to, see the gameplay and make sure it's fun. And that's not remotely even the case anymore. If that game isn't, standing out and it's eye-catching from the get-go, then there's not going to be a ton of interest in it. Especially today in the industry, when you've got so many of these publishers looking at, anywhere from 50 to 100 games a week. The pitchy game session that Liam and his team just ran a couple of weeks ago on Twitter had over 1,000 game pitches in one day on it. So there are a lot of companies out there. There's a lot of people, vying for that attention. You've really got to have something catching the publisher's eye in the first 8 seconds, basically. And that's going to run anything from cover art, well, what we want to call cover art, your graphic up front, your title screen. That's a good one. All the way through to the actual gameplay demo. We sent all the publishers that we know an email this morning about our upcoming event and some of the games that were showcased in it. And, we went through and picked the games that had the most appealing looking cover art on it to send it out there, because that's what's going to get everybody's attention. You really do have to make sure that part's polished now, or you're going to lose them right off the bat. You may never even get the meeting in the first place. So one of the next points that they bring out is, and he calls out a lot of companies. I'm not going to call them out directly. If you want to know who he's talking about, just pop over to that link. He says, one of the big complaints is, there was no feedback from them. I think it's just good manners when a publisher, even a small one, gives you at least one page of feedback if they have asked you for a demo. That's interesting, one, because later in the article he talks about when a lot of publishers were reaching out to them, he didn't turn them down. He says, it's not like I expressly say no, I just stop answering, which is kind of the exact thing that he was just complaining about from the publishers. But we see this. You can't expect to hear back from everybody that you talk to, and you're not going to get a whole lot of feedback. And there's several questions. There's several reasons for that out there. One, with the volume of games coming into a lot of these companies, they don't have the bandwidth to reply to each one of them, even if they wanted to. The other reason is the minute a publisher replies and says, we didn't like your game because of XYZ, they basically open themselves up to an argument from the developer. And I've seen this happen countless times. It's like, we didn't think that it stood out enough in the unique selling points, or the combat wasn't engaging enough. And then you just get in an email conversation with the developer. And yes, sometimes it works out really well and they can explain it, but generally publishers aren't going to do that because it's already out of their green light meeting. They've already gone past it, that they don't want to, it's not something they want to open up for discussion. One of our publisher clients, we do scouting for several publishers and helping them find games. And part of the frustrating thing that we deal with and that the publishers deal with is when we do find games, we reach out to the developer, we don't hear anything from them. And one of the publishers made a comment for me. It's like, it's just annoying how these developers never get back to you. And I just started laughing. And I'm like, and how many of the developers that have sent y'all stuff have you responded to directly? And, that's just the reality. Our internal metric is roughly 30 to 35% of the publishers that you reach out to will give you even an answer to the email. It's not something that they're always going to get back to you. And if you follow up with them and you've got, we talk about this when we do our, podcasts or our webinars on how to find a publisher. If you've got your CRM, or if you're using a CRM that lets you track to see how many times an email is opened, that's a wonderful way of seeing, okay, are they even looking at it, or am I not hearing back from this publisher because they're never actually getting the email? But if you can see that they're opening it and they're not responding to it, and they're not responding to a follow-up, chances are they're not interested. You really just need to, get up and move on. One of the next ones is that they did give me feedback, but it was basic, like, we didn't find some of the aspects of the game particularly engaging. Best to rework them. The thing is, they didn't even specify what these moments were or how they thought they needed to be reworked. Again, it's because a lot of these publishers don't want to get into, a big argument or, a deep, long conversation about why they don't like stuff. Some people like stuff, some people don't. That's just the reality of it. So it's really important when you're sitting down in these meetings. It's easy to do it if you're at a live event. If you're on a video call and you're in a virtual event, if you've got a camera, you can, pretty easily sit down and get a feed on Are they engaged? I mean, just check their body language. Is it something that you're keeping them engaged and they're excited about and they're leaning in towards you and they're asking a lot of questions, or are they just kind of out there? One of the things that you don't want to do is sit down, pull up your slide deck, and then start reading the entire thing to the person you're meeting with. It takes longer, and you're not really giving them any information that's not already on the screen. The publishers are going to go back and you'll send them the slide deck and the demo after the event. They're going to have a chance to look at it. Use your time in these meetings to really focus in on going beyond what's just on a slide deck, going into detail, playing the game a little bit, talking through what they're seeing in a video, that sort of stuff. What you absolutely don't want to do is go in there and say, just completely tune them out. And then 20 minutes into the meeting, their eyes are just glazed over and they have no interest in the game at all. So keep that in mind when you're going and you're sitting down, you're doing these meetings. This publisher is most likely been sitting through these things all day long. We'll have conferences where we end up having 36, 40 meetings, something like that. And yeah, it's draining. That's just the reality of it. So you want to make sure that you're keeping, the person you're meeting with engaged to, build off of that, down the road. We had Brad on the server, I guess it was like a couple of years ago, had an issue where, his laptop was down at one of the conferences and he wouldn't be able to show the demo. And I said, don't worry about showing the demo. I said, sit down and talk to the publisher, have a just engaging conversation with them, get to know them a little bit more on the personal side. Don't completely stress out on whether or not the demo is going to work or not. If the demo does work, great. But if it doesn't, don't worry about it. Everybody's going to have a chance to play it later. It's best to, in that situation, or if you just choose not to take a demo at all, it's best to basically use that time to get to know the publisher, build a meaningful personal connection, and that's going to help you down the road a lot. And, ask a lot of the questions about what they do and how they do it, and, what they've seen working in the market, what they haven't seen working, all of that sort of stuff. One of the next points that he brings up is, don't be afraid to ask a publisher for revenue forecasts, sales figures, copies. What do they expect? When do they expect it? He goes on to say the publisher's like, all games are different. So of course all games are different, but the publisher is not prepared to offer at least a rough estimate of the minimum and maximum possible outcome. Then apparently they simply do not want to talk about those numbers. And it immediately alerted me. And that's true. The publisher shouldn't necessarily be expected to give you exact forecasting. But if they're interested enough to be having the meeting with you, they should have an idea on what the spectrum is going to look like. Do they expect this thing to sell 5,000 copies? Do they expect it to sell 500? That sort of stuff, you've really got to be able to get in and get their sense of it, because all of this is going to come back when you sit down and you start trying to figure out who you're going to work with and who you aren't going to work with. Ask for a sample revenue share document. Most publishers will send that to you. I mean, because you want to know if you're getting a 50-50 rev share, what is that 50-50 of? Is it of net receipts? How is the net receipts defined? You want to make sure that, it's not going to have deductions out the wazoo and you're never going to get much. 50% of $10 isn't necessarily as good as whatever. It's analytics. just whatever. It's cold and I haven't had enough coffee. But the bottom line is you want to get into the specifics and the details on exactly how much they're looking to raise. Ask them how much they're going to spend in marketing. We've got one of our publisher clients will sit down in the proposal and absolutely say, this is the amount of money we're going to spend on marketing, both internal and external, to give the developer an idea of, how much they're going to get behind the game. that's always something key. You don't want to fall into, I don't want to say trap, but situation that a lot of developers do. I see so many companies that the minute a publisher shows interest in the game, they're so excited and they jump and sign the deal. And that's not necessarily always the best case scenario. There's a lot of options out there. We track close to 700 publishers right now. There's more people out there than you're probably thinking about. And there's lately like one or two different publishers being announced every single week. So there's a lot of options, and you want to make sure that you're getting all the information that you need in order to, make that decision. All right. How are we doing on, we got any questions yet? Because I feel like I have been.
No questions yet. We got some about ready to pop up, though. I see it. It's about ready to come up. I see it.
So just general stuff for a lot of these meetings. Like I said, make sure that you've got a demo ready. You want your pitch deck to be ideally 10, 12 slides. Don't sit down and do like a 20, 30 slide pitch deck, because that's another one of those situations where you're just absolutely going to lose people across the board when you do that. Go through it, ask them questions, get them engaged, see what they're thinking about on the game. When you're putting that video together, you want to make sure that it's showing a variety of different things and it's edited, basically, because what you don't want to do is sit down and say, okay, we got 25 minutes here. I'm going to show you 25 minutes of straight gameplay, like somebody's, streaming it on Twitch or something. There needs to be a variety in there, much like the pitch deck. You want to make sure that everything in that video is showing off the depth of your game and all those unique selling points. And if your game is really early, because I've seen this on several pitches lately, you get excited about it. You look at the video and you're like, oh my word, this just doesn't look good. But the developer has right there in like a little watermark, it says early prototype footage. Putting that simple watermark in there makes the world of difference, because the publisher doesn't know, are they looking at something that's beta stage? Is this placeholder art? What, stage is the game at? That makes a huge amount of difference. And it's one of those things that you should always be upfront with. Is this the graphics that they can expect towards the end of the development cycle, or is this something that you're just getting started on? So make sure you call that out as well when you're doing this. On the sense of, which publishers are worth working with, we did a whole session a week ago, 2 weeks ago, Indy, on, how to know if you're dealing with a shady publisher. But a lot of the reaction comes down to making sure you do that research beforehand, to make sure you talk to other developers, that have worked with them, that sort of stuff, and go from there. We talked to developers who were like, yeah, I signed with XYZ publisher because a friend of ours signed with them, and, they had a good experience working with them. That's always your best option for learning about these companies, is, finding out who worked with them in the past, how well did that relationship go, all of that sort of stuff. So ideally, when we go into a meeting on behalf of one of our clients, or even if it's a meeting at a conference for, us internally, we always have a cheat sheet, basically. And at physical conferences, we'll print these meeting sheets out beforehand. So you go in and you've got it. And it has all of the questions that you want to ask that publisher or that company right there in the meeting. So in virtual meetings, we've started using Notion internally. We use it for a lot of stuff. And we have a straight up template for meeting notes. It's like, this is the questions that we always want to ask. Make sure it's in. That way you don't forget, because conferences are chaotic. You're going to absolutely forget to ask things. You want to wish you could go back and do it later. If you go into each meeting with, a piece of paper printed out, or, a notepad up on the desktop, so you make sure you're covering all your points, it's going to pay off exponentially, because one, it's going to help you remember to follow up with them. But two, throughout the course of the meeting that things are getting answered. All right.
We got some questions. We got one from Artur in Discord here. I'll post that up on the screen. I wonder about revenue projections. When publisher projections look too high, should this worry me? And then the rest of the question is, he did his own market research, and he knows how median revenue for similar games look without outliers, and publisher numbers look really optimistic. Their marketing cost also looks pretty high, but they are okay if revenue estimation would materialize.
So one, on the marketing cost, high is better. I mean, a good marketing campaign does cost a lot of money. Even a bare bones indie publisher marketing campaign should be well in excess of $150,000, $200,000. That's not unusual. High revenue projections, yes, they could be, very confident in the game. But at the same time, you have to remember that a high projection on a spreadsheet that's delivered to you as the developer is going to show a higher, revenue share for you in the end. So absolutely do your own homework and look at it. If that publisher has a history of publishing stuff, in that genre that are similar to your games, you would like to assume that what they're looking at is pretty accurate. But yes, always double check it on Steam. But keep in mind that, that publisher, if they're getting to the stage where they're giving you revenue projections, they're interested in the game, and they know that other people are interested in the game as well. And so they want you to get excited about what they could potentially do. And one way to do that is to say, yeah, we think we're going to sell however many units, and it's probably higher than you may be thinking, because when they give you that number and it's like, this is the number, this is the amount of money you're going to get 50% of, that end result looks bigger. That's going to make you go, oh wow, it's like, I want to work with these guys because that's what they think they're going to be able to do. The reality is, projecting sales is not easy. I mean, even for companies that do this all the time, there are rough estimations that you can put out there, and most publishers in their P&L sheet, and just, FYI, they're probably not going to send you their actual P&L sheet, their profit and loss sheet, because that's confidential internally, and they're just not. But they may send you that revenue projection sheet. It's typically going to have a low, medium, and a high number. The medium is what you should be looking at. The low is, okay, this is damn near worst case scenario. And the high is, okay, look, if this thing just hits and it takes off, this is what we're going to, look at seeing. But you want to be able to have that confidence in the publisher that they know what they're talking about, and that, it's going to be accurate across the board. But yes, you should also very much double check those numbers, and just, like we say, do a sanity check on them. You're not going to get, a lot of comparables on console, because those numbers are kept pretty close to the vest by the platform holders. But you can go and look at, things like Steam Spy or VG Insights and things like that to get an idea.
Yeah, there's guesstimations from looking at stuff at Steam Spy, right? Okay, we got a couple questions from Swaggy Show. I'll do the first or the last one, the second one first. Do you have that resource for the meeting note template you were talking about that you could share for Notion?
Yeah, I can actually. I mean, it's not shareable right now, but if you, I can put that somewhere.
Come on into the Discord, discord.gg/indiegame.business.
That's a good point. Yeah. I'll put that together. Wait. Hold on.
He got excited over Notion.
Patrick's listening in.
Patrick,
can you pull that our meeting notes thing and just put it in a Google Doc and message me about it so I don't forget. Thank you very
And
much.
Swaggy, come on into the Discord and discord.gg/indiegamebusiness. There's a bunch of other resources in there too, as well. So here's the other question. Is it a good idea to note if you have other publishers interested, if it helps another publisher with their own numbers and what you might be asking for? For instance, if you want more than one offer, could you mention what is on the table to a different publisher?
You can. This is the part where we start playing mind games with the negotiation. Oh, wait, pull that back up, Dan.
Okay.
So one, it's safe to assume that from the publisher standpoint, that publisher should be safely assuming that, you know, there are more publishers interested in talking to you, because chances are they saw the game on Twitter or, you know, Next Fest or something in a very public light. Unless you're just having super early stage conversations with a publisher, the assumption is, yes, they're going to, you know, they should expect there to be other people involved. Do you want to start throwing out numbers? This is when the negotiation game starts playing. You can, but you just have to realize that you need to be very careful about how you do it. You don't want to make something up, because if you blow up a deal, you absolutely don't want to say, oh, okay, I'm talking to Annapurna, but Raw Fury offered me this much money. Don't do that.
They know each other.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God, yes. We all know each other.
Everybody's all friends. All the publishers are all friends, and they talk and hang out at things, and like, yeah, and plus the publishers are looking at 100 other games, and they're like, okay, go with them then. You know what I mean?
And that's very liable to happen. You know, they look at it and they're like, okay, well, you got other people interested, and I don't want to get in a bidding war on this game, so, you know, I'll just go to this next one on my list. You can absolutely use the fact that you have other publishers interested in there. The way I tend to phrase it is, if a publisher comes to us and says, we're offering you 50% of rev share and $500,000. You don't necessarily want to go back and say, well, this other company has offered me this, because then you start getting into bidding wars. Can be good, but they have to be handled properly. It's better to say something along the lines of, I appreciate that offer, but these terms are more in the line of what we're expecting and we're looking for. And when you define these terms, that should be based on some of the other, you know, things that you've had come in. But no, don't sit back on your heels and get all cocky because you have one company interested and one company not. No deal is done until the contract is actually signed. You could absolutely be discussing deal terms with a publisher, and one thing leads to another, and then all of a sudden they're like, well, no, we're not interested. But you've already like ostracized another 3 or 4 because you're like, well, we have an offer on the table. So yeah, short answer is yes. It's absolutely fine to, you know, let them know that other people are interested, but don't name names and be very careful how you handle those situations.
Basically, what it's like is, imagine that you're Luke Skywalker on the Millennium Falcon and you just shot one ship and hey, I killed him. And Jay is Han Solo and he looks back and he says, don't get cocky, kid.
Exactly. What'll happen, and I see this like absolutely all the time, publishers are going to come in and they're going to legitimately, or, you know, not legitimately, be very excited about your game. You simply can't read that as excitement as, you know, purebred interest and you're going to get a deal. This is why we always say, you know, it doesn't matter. People are always like, how's the conference going? It's like, it doesn't matter. Everybody at every conference is always interested in every game. That's just the reality. It's what happens 2 weeks after that conference that actually matters. So yeah, just be careful.
Don't get cocky, kid. All right, here is a question from FM Productions. How do you communicate if the project excuse me, is not quite on the track to meet certain milestones, like complications in the team, external factors, or wrong resource estimations. Ouch.
All right, so we're getting into serious shit now.
Yeah. He's not messing around.
Wait, dude, leave it up there because I can't
Okay.
see. Because I am not remotely following chat right now. So
I got you.
In these situations, honesty is the best policy, and it is always much better to identify issues that are coming up as they come up versus waiting 2 months and then going, oh yeah, by the way. The example I've talked about in the past is this actually happened, to me. We had a project we were doing development for. The producer on the project, I was executive producing. The producer on the project was basically rubber stamping, milestones and not truthfully tracking whether or not they, were happening. And we sent like the final, it was either beta or gold master off to the publisher, and the publisher was like, we're not paying for this milestone because there's no multiplayer in there. And I'm like, what do you mean there's no multiplayer in there? And I looked at the producer and I'm like, why is there no multiplayer in this game when it was supposed to have multiplayer in it? And he's like, oh, well, the team that we're working with wasn't able to do that. And I'm like, and so when did you find out about this? And when did you inform the publisher about this? And it was basically a clusterfuck. And it's one of those situations where these things come good. Up. It's not like every project is ever perfectly on time and perfectly on budget. And I absolutely laugh every time, I hear that. It's like, yeah, we're going to make all of our games are on time and on budget. Bullshit. That doesn't happen unless you're making a web game that has like no complexity whatsoever at it. All projects have, bumps in the road. The important thing is to let people know when it is happening and, just be upfront and talk through it, because there's a good chance that, the publisher has a way to help you get through it anyway. It's in everybody's best interest that the game, gets out on time. The number one thing that a publisher wants to know when they are signing a game isn't necessarily how many copies it's going to sell or how many levels it's going to have in it or whatever. The number one thing they want to know is this game actually going to ship? Because if it's not going to ship, none of the rest of that stuff's going to happen. So you always want to be, as clear and upfront about it as possible, explain the situation and work with your publisher to get through it. It's not the end of the world. I promise you. Every project has it.
Right, because that's part of the thing is they're there to help you. And if there's some things, they probably know some people that can help you. All right, here's a question from Discord from B-Dubs. How much of a marketing campaign should be mentioned in the pitch? Would it be better to have one mapped out and have a built-up community fan base?
All right, so are you talking about your pitch to the publisher or the publisher's pitch to you? The thing to keep in mind, and this is a common mistake that we see in pitches and in pitch decks from developers. You don't need to include a marketing budget and a complete marketing plan when you're pitching a game to the publisher. That's their job. They're the ones that are supposed to be doing that. They're the ones that are the expert at it. If you are an expert and you've shipped multiple games and you know exactly how the marketing campaign needs to be run and all that sort of stuff, then you may not even need a publisher. But if you've never published it and you don't have that specific expertise, then yes, you do need a publisher. You don't put a marketing budget in there either. Again, that's the publisher. So I see a lot of, pitch decks and they'll say, okay, we need $1 million. And when it starts breaking down into what's what in that $1 million budget, it'll be, okay, well, 300,000 of this is for marketing. Okay, take that out. Then your actual budget is $700,000 because the publisher is in charge of that marketing budget. On the community side, that is important. You want to be able to show the publisher in that pitch that, you have been working to build a community for it, that there is a desire for this game. So you absolutely want to include numbers on, how many followers you have on Twitter, how many wish lists you have, how big is your Discord. The publisher is going to find that out anyway. It's one of the very first things that we look at when we're doing scouting. It's not necessarily the end all be all of it, but if two games come in and they're fairly equal in the fact that, the publisher interest, if one of them already has a solid community built up and the other one doesn't, they're going to go with the one that already has the community. That's a much better base to build the entire marketing campaign around. So yes, you want to be growing your community, but no, you don't need to outline the entire marketing plan for your game in a pitch deck to the publisher. That's their job. Now, from the other side, yes, a marketing plan from the publisher when you're evaluating whether or not you want to work with them is a perfectly reasonable ask. What are you going to execute? What are the ways that you normally market these games? What are you going to spend? Those are all very good questions to ask the publisher.
All right, here we go. From Thomas T. Means Hardiman. Heard you mention 150K and up for marketing. Does this include social media? If it doesn't, what exactly is the money paying for?
So yes, that includes social media ads. That the publisher is generally going to have either an internal marketing and PR team or an external marketing and PR team that'll be doing things like, press releases and talking to influencers and, ads and all of that sort of stuff. And that's something that you should absolutely ask for too. If you're going to be spending $150,000 on marketing my money, how is that money allocated? That's the same as them asking you, if we are investing $150,000 in your game, how is your game, how is that allocated on your side? Perfectly fair to ask the very same question back to them. So what their budget will typically include is internal cost for people that they have internally, whether that's influencer relations or community management or whatever, there is a cost associated with that. Then money for, paying influencers or buying social media ads, all of that sort of stuff. That needs to be outlined in there as well. And then I had another point in there that I completely lost, but it's going to cover it's going to cover several things. But you're perfectly legitimate in asking, exactly what is this going to cover? There is an argument for and against, okay, should they be recouping the cost of their own staff? That's a case by case basis. It's one of those things that ideally no, but at the same time, you're technically recouping the cost of your staff as well. So take that as one of those maybe not.
And it depends. It depends. Yeah, in the publisher proposal, more than likely it will say like, marketing budget, social media, it'll say what it includes, right? They're not going to just like say it's a marketing budget and then you pay for it, and then afterwards, well, that didn't pay for this or this or this because
because we used to see publishers do this all the time, and they it's not nearly as prevalent now as it used to be, back in the retail days. But they would say, okay, well, we're including our cost to go to E3 in the marketing budget. It's like, wait a minute, you're going to be at E3 with like 5 other games. Why are you billing me for this? That's a cost thing on your side that you have to look at and you have to factor in.
Mm. Okay, David Kalichek, I hope I said that name right, from LinkedIn. So you mentioned game prototype video and how it should show interesting aspects of the game. What if we're working on management and narrative focused style game and it's hard to show action in that video?
Very good question. Right. I was just texting my wife to see who was picking up our son, and it's apparently me.
Make sure you pitch that to the correct publisher, right?
All right. So that's one thing, and yes, it is hard to show action in a management or a narrative style game, One of the things that I would recommend is take a look at other trailers for your type of genre. Management, it's a little easier because you can show all the different levels of detail and all the different things that you're managing, and there's a lot of variety in there. Narrative is sometimes a little harder, especially like if it's a visual novel. Most of your action is going to be, kind of the same throughout. But what you want to do in that case is make sure that you're showing off a variety of characters, a variety of situations, a variety of backgrounds. What you don't want is, 5 minutes of looking at the same basic screen with the same two people talking, and basically the only action you're getting in there at all is, okay, there's text scrolling. So in the event that you don't necessarily have action to show variety. Show this is what, your soccer team may look like at level 1 or early in the game, and then this is what your whole facility and everything looks like at the end. It's variation in those situations, not necessarily action.
All right. Scary robot games. Pros, cons of going public with the game or keeping it under wraps until the publisher can come on board and do the public launch. Every publisher is different.
What's the answer, Dan?
It depends.
It depends. So if you go back and listen to this show 3 years ago, the advice that I'm going to give you is different. And it's probably different 2 years ago and last year as well. What we currently recommend is in Steam, example, it's okay to have a wish list page that is just taking wish lists. The minute you drop into early access and you start charging, customers for it, you're going to lose about 50% of your publisher options. There are a bunch of publishers out there that only want to look at something that no one has seen before and it has had no marketing whatsoever. And there's a bunch of publishers out there that don't want to look at anything that doesn't already have, a community built behind it. You can't go wrong building your community. That's going to either pay off in terms of, getting publisher interest, or worst case scenario, if you have to self-publish, you've got a community built up there. The difference gets into when you start dealing with, are you selling it to consumers already? Because that's when a lot of publishers will look at it and go, okay, you've already launched the game, even though it's early access, that counts as a launch. And we can't control the marketing narrative. And so, we're not interested. That's the main difference in it. There aren't that many publishers out there that are going to legitimately be targets for your game that want something that no one has ever heard of before. They're, this day and age, they're accustomed to a game being announced or there being some traction on Twitter or something along those lines. I would simply caution you against releasing it to early access and actually starting to sell it until you have a publisher.
All right, here's one from B-Dubs. What is the best pitch format you've ever heard or seen? Pacing, energy, information, etc.
Personally, when I'm being pitched a game, I want the developer to know the questions I'm going to ask up front, the basic questions: budget, timeline, theme, genre, platform, unique selling points. And I want that to be addressed, very quickly, preferably on a one-page PDF. Here's the quick facts about the game. And from there, I want to see a good video. And then I want to have an honest to God conversation. The meetings that I don't like being pitched in is where we sit down and the developer just talks to me for 20, 25 minutes. And I'm like, I have questions. I want to get in and ask some of this stuff too. It's about engaging the person and it being back and forth versus, me just sitting and being lectured for half an hour. Every game's different. Everybody likes to pitch their games different. I see a whole lot of these things, but it generally comes down to engagement and excitement. If it's the last day of a show and the developer's just like, oh God, all right, Jay, here's the pitch, here's the video. What do you want to know? And I'm like, not a lot, because you're obviously as interested in this as I am.
That's probably better than here's 45 minutes of lore. You can ask your questions for 5 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. It's like, I don't need to know all that level of detail in there right now. I need to know the basics and the facts. And even to the point that if you're those quick facts that I talked about, if you get those to the publisher beforehand, that way they can make sure that the meeting is going to make sense for them too, because you don't want to walk into that meeting and you as the publisher, you're like, okay, I'm looking for stuff that's up to about $250,000 in funding, and then you've got this project that you're looking at and the developer sits down and goes through all this stuff and you're like, so how much do you need? And they're like, $3 million. It's like, why the fuck am I sitting in this meeting when I could have been somewhere else? So it really varies based on the game, but it needs to be engaging. I need to be wanting to play that game, by the end of that 20 minutes. How you get there is going to vary on the publisher and the person and all that sort of stuff. But I always recommend be upfront about the facts about the game and what you need and all that sort of stuff. And the rest of it will flow right on through. And don't read me your slide deck.
Yeah, don't read the slide deck. Do the slide deck but talk about it. Don't just read it word for word, because you could do that yourself, right?
Exactly. I am literate.
Right. Arcade from Discord, on the subject of a pitch budget, we've heard advice to intentionally pitch low because everyone expects everyone to run over time and budget. This feels like it's inviting failure and or crunch, but not doing so, if all others are doing it, reduces your appeal. What are your thoughts?
Don't pitch low. Don't pitch low. Don't pitch high. Pitch what you pitch. And don't go in and say, well, we need $100,000 when you actually need like $500,000. Another one of the big things that we see is, I'll look at a pitch submission and it'll say, okay, we've got 6 people working on this for 2 years and we need $75,000. And I'm like, that doesn't add up. That doesn't make sense. And what that typically means is the developer's working on it in their spare time. They have a real job. This is a nights and weekend type thing. It's $75,000 to get through that amount of time, and it's going to take that long because they're not doing it full time. Publishers generally want to make sure, if they're paying you to do it, that this is what you're doing. This isn't like a night and weekend project. They're going to invest this money in it. They want you working on it full time. It's the whole honesty is the best policy. And part of this is because I've been doing this for 20 some years and I'm totally past the BS point on all of this stuff. There's a lot of games out there. There's a lot of publishers out there. Don't waste anybody's time. If you need $500,000 to make the game you want to make, say that.
Yeah.
Every publisher out there,
blunt and upfront.
Oh yeah. But every publisher out there knows that number's fluid. If they really like the game and you need $500,000 to make it, but the publisher only really wants to spend about $350,000, they'll ask, okay, so I love your game, but what if we only did $350,000? What would that game look like at the end? And if that doesn't work for you, then you tell them it doesn't work and you move on. You don't want to waste your time. You don't want to waste anybody else's time. And don't go in and say, we need $200,000 to make this game, but the game that we really want it to be is, $750,000 game, because that's what they want to see in the first place. Is how much is it going to cost to make the game you want to make, and then work from there. But no, don't go in and pitch low. Don't go in and pitch high. Pitch the pitch. Tell them what you need.
Pitch. Right. Jelly from Discord. Should you be revealing your wish list numbers to the publisher or keep that confidential?
Yes, reveal it. There's no benefit to keeping it confidential. The reason, and I'm going to guess here, but I'm guessing because this is the reason I see most developers withholding their wish list. They you want to withhold it because you think the number's too low. there's not a number too low. And this is a subject that this is a dead horse that I beat in a lot of publisher greenlight meetings. We'll have somebody looking at a game and it's like, well, they only have like 250 wish lists. Like, yes, because they're an indie developer that has no experience in marketing, no experience in building the community. That's why they need a publisher. If you go out and you say, yeah, we've only got 40 wish lists, but that's because we haven't promoted it and we don't know how best to do that. And that's why we need a publisher. That's perfectly fine. Most of the publishers, if you've already got a Steam page up, they're going to ask you how many wish lists you have anyway. There's very little point in keeping it secret. But just be upfront about it and say, look, this is the number's low. We want there to be more, but we're not marketing experts. That's why we need a publisher.
Yeah. Here we go from Ardemon Games. Another follow-up question is, if as the owner, how much should I expect to budget for a great playable demo? Really more for curiosity because we're already 2 years in with Princess of Galaxia. Is that a My Little Pony game? Princess Galaxia? Isn't that from My Little Pony? Or am I mistaken? I don't know. Anyways, yeah. How much should I expect to budget for a great playable demo? Why would a biker know about that?
It's not something that you can, just say, look, this is how much budget we're gonna put towards a demo. Because one of the things that you don't want to get caught doing too much of is taking away time from actual honest to God development to create a demo. Big, huge companies do that because they have resources to spend on things like that. It's not necessarily trying to figure out what your budget for a demo should be. It's more along the lines of making sure that the demo showcases all the cool parts of your game, or at least a good chunk of them. There's not really a magic number that goes along with it.
All right, Jerome Zanker. I often have communication problems regarding marketing budget. Some include internal work hours, social media posts on our own sites, our own newsletter. Some don't. What should some such budget include?
So from the developer side, it's not something that you need to outline in terms of a hard task budget to the publisher. What I would do is simply say, this is what we do on the community building side. This is what we're doing to promote the games ourselves, and then go into, this is how many email subscribers you have and how many wish lists and how many social media followers. But say, this is what we're doing already to build community and to build awareness of the game. What can you as the publisher come in and do to help us on that and support it? It's hard to define a budget, but going back to that article from earlier, one of the really good points that I saw in there was, he mentions that he told the publisher that the publisher should be getting less of a cut on Steam because they already had a massive Steam wish list. Depending on how big massive is, you could actually argue that. Whether or not you'll be successful arguing it is a whole nother question. But you can absolutely put numbers on that and then use that in your negotiation when you're talking about revenue share. But there aren't like hard and fast numbers on this is what an email subscriber is worth. This is what a social media follower is worth when it comes to revenue share. I would focus more on, we're providing value because we're already doing this and we're going to continue to do this, and just use that in your overall rev share bargaining. But it's hard to go in and say and put an absolute number on it. Now, if the publisher sends you a marketing plan that has a budget in it and they do outline how much the cost is, each one of those things are, then yes, you can go back and say, okay, well, we're also doing this, and match the number, and it goes that way. But there's not like an arbitrary, off the top of your head, this is what my marketing is worth number.
And another question here from Ardemon Games. Is a free demo technically a launch?
Depends. No, but you're going to get some publishers that say it is. But I mean, that number, we're not talking like 50% of the numbers. I would say probably 10, 15% of the publishers out there might argue that a free demo is a launch, but realistically, no, it's not, especially now with the fact that Steam's doing these next fests like every 3 months, it seems like. A free demo is a free demo. It should not be considered a launch. But having said
But
that, you're absolutely going to have some of them that do.
yeah. Okay, here we go. Also, what's the best way to increase our community in the early stages? Just posting more and more content, or would it be consistently running ads?
Oh, that's a good one for some of our community folks. So one, if you haven't checked out our YouTube page, we literally have 3 years of content up there with interviews with people like Victoria Tran and awesome community management folks that we've done on the podcast and at conferences. So check that out for one, because I'm always going to defer to them and those experts on how they should be doing it. The general rule is buying ads doesn't get you as engaged of a community as organic does, and it costs money. Organic is, for the most part, free. If you're going out there and you're putting out Instagram or TikTok or Facebook or whatever content on your own, that's what you want to be focused on. Don't worry about spending money on ads at this stage, because you're not. The one exception I might make to that rule is if the game is pretty far along and you're trying to drive wish list, to run an ad on that. But even then, if you're, for most developers, money's tight, focus on organic and work it that way before you start worrying about buying a whole bunch of ads.
Good advice. Another question from Arcade on the subject of early access. We love science and learning things. We're thinking to do free experiments on itch.io before talking to publishers. The rest of the question was to show data, prove ideas, establish interest, build audience, etc. What are your thoughts on that?
That's actually not a bad idea at all. And I see several developers do that. And so here's the flip side of the coin. If you put a lot of stuff out there on itch and it is not received very well, and you get a lot of negative feedback or stuff like that, then it's going to backfire in your face. But it's the same as going out there and saying, you put something out in early access on Steam, and this is like another reason why we say don't sell it in early access yet.
But
if you start selling, if you start selling stuff, and then you've got like live reviews, and the publisher goes to that itch page, and they're like, "Oh, okay, so everybody hates this. We don't want to publish it at all, even if it is just experimenting on your side." The same as if they look at a early access game on Switch, on Steam, and if the reviews are in that dreaded mixed or God forbid negative category, that's almost a death sentence, because there's so many games out there that the publisher's going to look at that and go, okay, done. Nope. We're going to move on to the next one. So it is a really good way of, testing out gameplay and things like that. You just have to be very careful about how you do it, because if it backfires and it goes very negative, then it's not going to help you at all. But at the same time, I have seen developers in greenlight meetings with publishers who have had they have a lot of followers and a lot of likes on itch, and the publishers are immediately like, okay, how did you do that? What drove all of that engagement right there? So yes, it is a good idea. Just be very careful. And if it starts looking bad, then remember, it's hard to go in and say, I know our Steam reviews and our itch reviews suck, but this is why. Chances are they don't care. They've already looked at it and saw it, and that switch is flipped in their head, and they're going to move on to the next game.
Yeah. Here's another question from Swag Show. Is a Patreon support page considered a launch?
No. honestly, even an itch page isn't considered a launch, because the sad thing is those don't drive enough consumer interest for the publisher to be worried about it. You can absolutely have a game on an itch page, and only a very tiny percent of publishers are going to go, oh, well, you already launched it on itch, we don't want it. I don't want to say they don't take it seriously, but it's not something that I've ever seen a publisher turn down a game because you have a Patreon page and you think that they think that's a launch. The bigger concern is we've talked to several developers, and like Patreon pages aren't really that great for driving a lot of revenue. But no, you're perfectly fine with that.
Well, here is a great question that I know is going to segue into some other things here. Artemon Games, is there a hub of publishers to look at to pitch to? I would love to pitch Square Enix, but I don't think they invest in indies. A hub of publishers.
So one, go to indiegame.business, and when you go there, there's either going to be a very fancy, pop up that says, hey, would you like our list of publishers? Or in the top right corner of the page, it says, click here for our list of publishers. And you can download our entire list of publishers, so like 650, 700 publishers separated out by platform. And that is a fantastic way to get started and start looking for the publishers to go to. Your other option is to go to these digital events. It's like ours is coming up in 2 weeks. We'll have a good batch of publishers there, but it's not necessarily just ours. I mean, digital events are a shitload more affordable than flying out to GDC for a week. And God knows there's one like every week. It seems like these days, multiple ones a week. Those are really good places to do a lot of research, because Meet to Match powers our events. I love Meet to Match. They are awesome. We've been working with them for years. When you are signed into the platform, you can see immediately, here are the publishers that are going to be here. And it says in there, this is what they're looking for. We're looking for games in this budget range, this platform, free to play versus premium versus whatever. It's clear cut right there. This is what we're looking for. And so even if you're not necessarily ready to start meeting a lot of them yet, sometimes it's worth signing up for those events just to get some market research done. And shameless plug, tickets are $50, but if you use the code friend of IGB, there's a discount in there. So, we absolutely do it to keep it affordable. And I will always say this will never, ever change. If you are a developer and you can't afford a ticket and your game has a demo, because that's what publishers want to see before they, sign on for a meeting, message me directly, hit me up on Twitter, Discord, email me. I'll get you a pass. We do it for you. So no problem there.
We got one more right here. Bam. From Jerome from Discord. Thoughts about simultaneous releases regarding marketing and potential sales, e.g. Steam and Switch, or move Switch 3 to 6 months after the PC to reduce bugs and work on improvements, etc. on PC first?
Dan, what's the answer?
It depends, right? One of the answers is you're also thinking about marketing beats, right? You release it on PC in 1 month, that's a marketing beat, right? And then usually that goes near like this, unless your game is like super, super popular, then it goes that. But it usually is like it peaks and then it goes down. But then when you release on a different platform, sales again go back up on the first platform that it was released as well, right? So that's the way publishers think. So you got to think about the marketing beat. But it depends. Some publishers are like, we want you to release on everything all at once right now.
Exactly. Jerome, go to our YouTube page and search for Corey Treese, and because we've had Corey on here multiple times, both on podcasts and conference, and that's one of the things that he specifically talked about when they are releasing their games, and they self-publish everything. They've been self-publishing their games for like eight or 9 years. They specifically stagger their launches for that reason that Dan just said. They want to get that big push on PC first, and then as things start dying down, then they launch to iOS and Android, or they launched a console at that point or whatever. One, for an indie team, that's easier because you're not trying to manage launches on multiple SKUs at one time. And we have a session at our conference in a couple of weeks that is specifically talking about how to launch your game on consoles, coming from the guys over at Decoy Games. So that'll be worth listening to. And that's free. If you want to listen and participate in the sessions that we're having at the conference, it does not cost you a dime. Get you a pass, because we'll send you the slide decks and all the follow-up information if you have a pass, because that's how we know we have your email and we can send it to you. But it doesn't cost anything. It's literally there. We want you to learn this stuff. But it is, if you're self-publishing, especially as a small team, it is generally easier because you can manage all of this stuff on a rollout. If it's a bigger company and a big publisher, and they're going to invest $500,000 plus into a marketing campaign, they want all this shit to come out at once, so they can maximize on that one big push. But definitely go to the YouTube, look up Corey's talks. There's like 2 or 3 of them, and he specifically talks about that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. It looks like we hit all the questions. Wow. That was amazing.
And I still have a voice.
Oh, here we go. Here's another one from David Kelichek. Is it a requirement that we build a community before we contact the publisher? We'd like to focus on dev side because we're a small team and organic growth takes a lot of time.
It does, David. And it's not a requirement. Nobody's going to have a checkbox that says don't submit your game if you don't have 2,000 wish lists. But fundamentally, it's a requirement. You need to be building that community from the moment you have something to share. It doesn't matter if that's a screenshot, if that's a GIF, if that's whatever. You absolutely 100% need to be building that community from day one. And it's not something that you have to spend a ton of money on. The guy to my left does community management stuff for people. There's a lot of folks on our Discord server who are freelance community management people, and they can absolutely work with you. Don't pay them on a rev share. We're not going to recommend they work on a rev share. Pay your people, but we're not talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars to get it done. Have somebody who has done it before, who is accustomed to doing it, let them handle it, pay them to do it. And that way you don't have to worry about it. You don't need to take time out of your day when you're doing programming or art or design or whatever else to do community management. Let them do it. I'm a prime example. I suck at Twitter, but the fine folks over at Vicarious PR handle all of our social media and all of that sort of stuff for Indie Game Business. And I love them. They are wonderful to us. So yes, definitely let somebody who knows what they're doing do it. But just keep in mind, it doesn't necessarily have to cost you a shitload of money.
Yeah, and a good community manager will be asking you for content. Give us images, give us gameplay, give us this, tell us the news, tell us the right? And then they can manage your Discord, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, TikTok. All right.
Wait, hold on. So somebody asked if we can ask more. I don't have anywhere to go for another 20 minutes.
Okay,
so
I'm good. We'll do it.
All right. So we'll probably end up splitting this up on the podcast because
okay.
I don't want people looking at it going, holy shit, I don't want to listen to Jay talk for an hour and a half. But yeah, if you got questions, keep going in. I mean, I'll sit here and answer questions until I have to go pick up my son. So yeah.
All right. Vixen Gamer, what's the minimum size of the community you need before going to a publisher?
0. You don't need to have any of it. It's just a tremendous help if you do. But it's also, like I said earlier, if it's not a situation where you want to say, completely hide it. If your numbers are low, that's okay. Just say, look, we're a small developer. We don't have time to do this. But there's not, like I said, there's not like a checkbox that you're going to have on a submission page. That's like, do you have more than 4,000 people on Twitter? Are there more than, 800 people in your Discord? I mean, we look at games all the time and pull up, they're like, join our Discord. We look at it, and there's like 30 people in there. That's fine. I understand that you're a developer. You're not a marketing firm, so there's not necessarily a hard number, but it's something that you just need to be working on. You need to be building it, because it's like everything else in life. You can only count on yourself at the end of the day.
All right, so here's a question. This is a two-parter, I guess. Let's say our game is complete. We fill out the forms, documentation, and all of the necessary steps are completed to be on console. How much more worth is it to be on console versus PC? Depends.
It depends.
Yeah.
So, I mean, platform always comes down to the demographic of your player. And so we could do a whole nother session on this, and I'm sure we have sessions on YouTube about it, but you always need to understand who your target player is, and don't be that company that's like, our game is for everybody. Bullshit. It's not. There is no game that's for everybody. You understand who your target demographic is for the player, and then you can build to that. Each platform has a slightly different demographic. If you're making a match 3 game, the PS5 is not your platform. If you're making a open world 3D RPG, mobile is not your platform, unless you're Genshin Impact, and I guess now it is your platform. But generally, it always comes down to, where does your game fit in the most, and that's going to come down to the genre, the scope, the business model. Yes, we have free-to-play games on PC and console, but it's definitely more of a play style for mobile. But yeah, it's going to come down to the game. But understand who your target player is, and then build from there, and that will tell you. And also keep in mind, not entirely up to you whether you go to console. Yes, if you have $100 or $200 or whatever Steam charges these days, you can go to Steam. There's nothing preventing you from doing that unless you're making, porn games. But
even then,
console is always going to be dependent on, is that platform holder going to allow you to be on their platform?
Right. Even then, I've seen some games on Steam that are. Jerome, what are your thoughts about prioritization of social medias? There's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snap, YouTube Shorts, TikTok, etc. Are there some more necessary than others?
Hell, Jerome, there are some there that I don't even know what they are. So I started seeing these YouTube Shorts, and maybe that's like TikTok. I didn't know
Facebook does that too.
Was still a thing, but I guess it is. I'm old. I don't do social media. I literally almost get a briefing from my wife in the mornings as we're getting, breakfast and getting everybody out the door to school and to work on what my friends and family are doing in the world, because I don't pay attention to Facebook. Not to offend the folks out there that are on Facebook watching us right now. This is literally like the only time I'm on Facebook. It really just comes down to, again, where your audience is. Yes, TikTok is hot right now. I could not tell you the difference between YouTube and YouTube Shorts. I don't know which one is best for you. This is probably better scoped. I will tell you what, I will absolutely ask this question in some of our marketing Q&As. We have a lot of marketing focused talks coming up at the conference, and I will absolutely ask there, but I could not off the top of my head tell you, because I am the worst at social media.
So it depends, right? Oh, can I do a little self-promotion, Jay, real quick?
No. Yes.
Yeah. All right, so I'm a Twitch partner, Twitch TV/indie, it says right here, right? So if you want somebody to maybe play your game on stream and tear it apart, you can just reach out to me. I'm on the Discord at discord.gg/indiegamebusiness. But I stream Tuesdays and Fridays now, and playing indie games. So yeah, if you got a cool game that you maybe want me to play or and tear apart, yeah.
Can I tell you the streamer that my son turned me on to that I absolutely enjoy watching because he does that? Let's Game It Out.
Let's Game It Out, yeah.
He plays like simulation games and absolutely does every damn thing he can to do to break them. And that's
what Izzy showed me, that guy, and we sit there and laugh. And
my God, it is hilarious. So and it's like, I don't know if he was a QA tester in an earlier life or not, but that he would be a great one because he just sees something and goes, let's see if we can break it. And
Right,
does it.
right. It's funny. You can't not help but not watch it. How badly do I tear it apart? I'm not going to be like mean or rude or anything. I'll just be like, this isn't fun. This isn't fun. You know.
I mean, and this is one of those things too. If as you're prepping for a conference, having streamers play your game is amazing, even if it's not a huge streamer, because we used to have to pay tons of money for that, and we called it focus groups. And now you can literally watch somebody else play your game and get the same information, because that's all a focus group was back in the day. We would sit somebody down in front of the computer with a camera in their face, and we would sit with the developers and watch. You know, our screen would show what they're doing as far as where's their mouse is or whatever they're doing on the screen, and then their face. And you can tell where people are confused or disengaged or excited or whatever. That used to cost a ton of money. Now it's called streaming.
Right. Well, some streamers take money. I mean, I'm not opposed to taking money.
I'm saying it doesn't cost nearly what it used to cost through a focus group.
I will officially rip your game apart for money. We'll just call it official.
All right, but and that's an actual. I mean, a lot of developers don't realize that's an actual thing.
Right.
Publishers go to streamers and even web reviewers and the media for things they call mock reviews. And they will basically pay the streamer or the reviewer play this game, do a review of it, but it just doesn't go public. They're not posting it anywhere. And it's so they can get an idea of, what
I want that job.
Yeah. That's a real job. Start telling people you do mock reviews.
Hook me up. To tell it's Twitch TV/indie, INDIE, like indie games. Here, I'll just type it in the chat.
You keep pointing to that, but that's not what your name tag says.
What?
Your name tag just says indie-Dan long right now. It doesn't have your Twitch name on there.
Oh, well, I can put it in there.
But yeah, it's twitch.tv/indie.
There. That's what it is.
If we had money, we wouldn't be here in the first place. Yeah, same here. There was, but absolutely, getting streamers and reviewers to do a mock review of your game is a very real thing that publishers pay for all the time.
I want that. How come nobody ever told me about that job? I didn't know there was a mock reviewer.
I'm telling you now. Does that count? You never asked.
I just know now. That's great. So it looks like we're petering out on questions. But if you do have more questions, come on over to Discord, discord.gg/indiegamebusiness. Oh, wait, here we go.
Yeah, there's like the minute you said that, we got 2 more questions.
Yeah, here we go. Okay. So for Merle, what's more attractive to publishers when meeting? Like, what's a no-no for a meeting?
A lot of the same guidelines as our Discord server. Don't be a dick.
Right.
You don't want to go in and be bad-mouthing people, and I've seen this before. And it's like, well, we used to work, we're a new team of developers and we used to work with this other company, but they suck because blah, 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 blah. This industry is absolutely too small and too tight. And like we said earlier, we all know each other, that if you start doing that, you're going to blacklist yourself and you don't want to burn bridges. So don't go in and badmouth anyone. Don't go in and jump immediately into, a lot of the classic stuff, religion and politics. Don't go into any of that. Just, be there, be professional. If you are at a live conference, for God's sake, shower, wear decent clothes.
Brush your teeth.
Yes. All of that sort of stuff.
Carry mints.
But, most importantly, it's like, be yourself and showcase the game. Don't try to overthink the meeting and go in and say, well, I think this publisher is going to be looking for this. So this is how I'm going to, tweak the game, because you may very easily find out that that's not what they were looking for at all. You don't really know. We had this conversation internally this morning, with my team about how quickly and how often publishers change what they're looking for, what, that sort of stuff. And so don't try to go in and overthink it. Go in, tell them why your game kicks ass, show them why it kicks ass, and explain to them how it's actually going to make it to market at the end of the day, and then go into the details. But a lot of it is, a lot of what we just talk about soft skills. Just be yourself, be human.
And think of it as like a publisher, if they're looking for a game, whether it's at a conference or whatever, they probably looked at 30 games that week. So bam, show the best stuff. Just show the don't show the stuff that is kind of, this is going to get reworked. Or this, if you're showing the demo, show the very best stuff. Bam, make it quick, make it impactful. Like the first thing you want to show them, you want them to go, wow. And the last thing you want to show them, you want them to go, wow. So they remember it, right? The best and the best. And then, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Short attention span. Even.
All right, we got one more, and then, I got to roll.
Where's the one more?
On Discord, I got it. How would you approach publishers about working on their IP way before prototyping? I'm not being condescending. I'm being very serious. Ask them. We see these huge cycles with companies like Nickelodeon and Disney and all the big media companies. It's like they'll completely outsource all their development for like 2 years. And then somebody in a boardroom goes, well, it's pretty expensive to keep outsourcing all this development. Why don't we bring this development in-house? And then they do a big press release, and it's like, they're opening 2 studios, or they acquired a studio. And so all the work's going to be done in-house. And that happens for about 2 years. And then somebody in the boardroom goes, this is kind of expensive to have all these people in-house making these games. Maybe we should look into outsourcing and licensing the IP. And, this cycle goes on forever. The best way is, so one, you need to be able to show immediately that you deserve to be working on that IP. You don't want to go in and say, we've never done a game before, but we saw how big Super Smash Brothers is and how big this Nickelodeon fighting game is. And now Warner Brothers is going to have one. And we think we can do that. We want to do that with your IP. And they go, well, what other fighting games have you made? And we're like, none. We haven't ever made one. That's not going to get you very far. When you're pitching to work on somebody's IP, you always want to lead with the fact that you're going to make a game similar to ones you have experience making. Don't go in if all you've ever done is strategy games and go, we want to make a kart racing game with your IP, because that's not ever going to happen. One, you got to be prepared to, if they don't do outsourcing, then they're going to look to you to pay them for the license. So that's step one. Are they going to fund this themselves, or are they expecting you to, license this IP from them? And those are 2 wildly different holes we can dig into later on. But the most important thing is to ask, because there's no harm in it. The worst they're going to say is no. And if you've done this long enough, or even if you're just getting used to it, you're going to develop thick skin about that. That's just the reality of it. Some of them you may not hear back from. That's just another reality of it. But you want to go in and say, you have this IP, we have this game, and we think that would be great, and we're the team to do this because we've done similar games before, and start the conversation that way. But, my first company, after I left the job I was at for 10 years, we started out doing contract development for companies like National Geographic and Nickelodeon and Disney and all those folks. And then when we started doing our own original titles, I went out and got, the license, the IP from a New York Times bestselling author. And one of the publishers goes, Jay, you just started this company. How did you get a New York Times bestselling author's IP? I said, I asked them, and they said, yes, we like that idea. And then we went from there. So that's generally all it takes. And sometimes you can get really good IP, especially from companies that aren't necessarily in the industry. They're not turning out a lot of these games. You can go to them and say, look, there's a good case that a game based on your IP would do very well, and we'd like to work with you on it, and you build it out from there. But it's like, when you start dealing with IPs and licenses and contract work for hire, that's a whole new ball of wax that we can go into. And if we want to do a show on that one day, we can absolutely do it. But the first thing is to simply ask. And the second thing is to, give them concrete proof and show them why you're the best team to do this, and you're not going to completely screw it up.
Excellent.
All right.
Thank you guys so much. If you got more questions, you can post them in Discord, discord.gg/indiegamebusiness. And are we going to have a show next Friday after Thanksgiving?
No
show next Friday. But then we have the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. We're going to be live on Twitch, Facebook, YouTube with the Indie Game Business. It's the AIR conference, right?
Yep. So yeah, if you aren't on one of these channels already, just go to indiegame.business, posting that in chat right now. And it's got the speakers that we've announced so far, even the folks that are going to be there in terms, the session names. And we have, hold on, let me cheat here. I can go and look at the companies. We're up to close to 100 different companies that you can meet with. And that will probably double in the next week, because nobody really signs up for these things until the week or so before we go live. But a lot of opportunities to meet with investors, to meet with marketing teams, PR teams, publishers, or if you're on the other side of the table, a lot of different developers you can meet with. Like I said, we've got over 40 some games that are in the showcase right now that are going to be looking for new homes. So it's a great place to be.
Awesome. And if you want me to play your game, I'm on Discord. I'm an admin in there. It says Indie, or my email is indiefromtwitch@gmail.com. I just doxed myself.
And if you come to me, I'll tell you how much he's going to charge, because I'm only going to take a minor cut of that, for giving him the idea to do mock reviews.
That's right. Thank you guys so much. Have a blessed day. Enjoy your weekend. And this will be a podcast here in the next hour. So look for that too. Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you.